you. My religious journey has been strange. I was born Christian, church going, Sunday school, all that jazz. My typical day routine was wake up, pray, eat, family Bible reading, pray, pack up my bags, rinse, pray, learn, pray, repeat. And I never questioned it. Until one day, I woke up from my bed and realized, I fucking hate this. So I stopped caring about church, the Bible, all that stuff. I dabbled with some other religions, but nothing ever stuck. I was 12 when all this started. I wasn't disciplined enough. And this isn't some prodigal story of how I fell into bad company and I realized that Christianity is the answer all along. No, my life was going great for me. I had everything I could ever want. Friends, books, games, family, everything was great. All that only changed when I chose to become Christian again. Reconversion was the best and worst decision I ever made. Best because, well, we'll talk about that later, but I can confidently say that half the time, reconverting almost killed me. And whenever it didn't, it made me want to kill myself. Suddenly, there were all these rules and customs and being set apart. And like I wasn't in an environment where it was cool to be Christian, But I always had it in the back of my mind that this wouldn't last forever. I'd be moving to a new school soon. A Christian school, in fact. It's not where I wanted to be, but at least it would be Christian. And I remember arriving there, settling in, and as days went by, realizing that nothing changed. The only proper friends I made were the others who wanted to take God seriously. So one day, I had this friend, let's call him Jake. So I'm walking down the middle path heading to the dorm. Jake meets me coming from the other direction and he tells me,
Sir Johnson said he's cancelling your paper because you came into class late.
Oh my God, are you serious? Fuck that guy. It's an unspoken but well-established rule that proper Christians don't cuss. And I don't remember that incident with Jake just because it was the first time I said a naughty word. Looking back, I think I actually used to swear a lot more after reconverting than before. I actually remember the first time I cussed. Bear with me for a minute, but this was just after I stopped being Christian. I was like 13, 14, maybe younger. And my sister had taken the TV remote and I was so pissed off that I quietly muttered this little subtle like, fuck you under my breath. Like the little boy that I was. And even then, I felt dirty, like, ugh. While I was in Christian, swearing became a habit for me. But in the same way I would lie to my parents about my faith and be their good, perfect, model Christian kid, I lied to everyone about cussing. It's like, while I was at home, I was this sweet, tender-lipped angel, and then whenever I was not at home, I came out as this cussing woman. And I carried this behavior to my Christian school. My brain was split. It's not that I didn't cuss around my Christian friends because I didn't want to. I wouldn't cuss around those friends because I physically could not decide to. So that day with Jake felt like a glitch in the matrix. One that led me to ask myself,
there's a professor, obviously, who gave you the bad grade. One logical presupposition is that you're in some sense insufficient in relationship to the course. But another logical and instantaneous categorization is to throw that person into the category of malevolent predator. And you'll do that by becoming upset and cursing the person in your imagination. Cursing is exactly right, and I can tell you why. So, primates of various sorts, like vervet monkeys, have predator alarm cries. They have one, if you look across it, for things that attack from the sky, for like cats that climb into the trees to get you, and they have one for things that rustle through the grass, snakes, for example. And so each of those produces a distinctive alarm cry. That alarm cry system is the same system that we use to swear with. We use short, guttural words. So they're archaic words because short words tend to be very, very old. And so and we have a separate system that utters those sorts of vocalizations. And that's the system that's disinhibited in Tourette's, which is why people with Tourette's swear. And so when you curse the professor for giving you the bad grade, you are using the same bloody linguistic system that your ancestors used to categorize snakes in the grass or predators that swoop down from the sky. It's very, very interesting.
Editor part here, I forgot to mention this. The guy I just showed you is Jordan Peterson. By day he's a professor and by night he goes by the back. Before we dig into the church, I want to establish my base understanding of this topic. As Christians, we say there's a spiritual undertone to cussing, and I don't disprove that. But I don't have a strong knowledge of it. And what I do know is that personally, whenever I would swear, it's just because it felt good. And whenever I didn't feel good, at least it felt natural. This makes sense as to why we swear in the first place. You see a predator, this case in the form of a stuck-up teacher, and you can't do much about them because you as a student in this nature are the prey. So in order to warn other prey, you make this sharp, distinctive sound that's usually one syllable, right? That in the modern era of speech has collated into these forms of cuss words. Now, your teacher, on the other hand, isn't a predator in fact. Despite their very questionable actions, they are in every way as human as you are. So you signaling them out as a predator and potentially ostracizing them out of the entire prey society is actually not a very nice thing to do. That explains exactly why they may be offended. And we can all attest to this because no matter what stage in your life you find yourself, hearing someone speaking from their heart and telling you to fuck off leaves a sting within you, because no matter who you are, you'll always have an ingrained need for human connection and community. But from a Christian perspective, the psychology behind cursing doesn't justify it. So for example, sex feels great, right? I wouldn't know, but oh boy. So you could have it all the time. But the Bible says we shouldn't be promiscuous, and that's why we choose not to have sex with random strangers all the time. So this diagram can be split almost perfectly in half, where one side is Christians who cuss and the other side is Christians who don't. Just changing the titles to Bible reading Christian and more casual Christians, almost nothing changes except these few dots. And these dots are where everything matters, because these dots are people. Scary thing about Christianity compared to other ways of life is that if you mess up, eternal damnation. There's no in between. That's not an option for most Christians. So one person's opinion on cursing doesn't matter anywhere near as much as God's opinion does. Now I can't lie and say I've read every verse of the Bible. Maybe I have, but never intentionally and from my very sophisticated research. Despite all the many blogs and articles may try to have you think, the Bible never directly addresses this issue. So whenever the topic of cursing comes up, you see these verses alone. Bam, bam, bam. But those verses are exactly why I believe swearing is not a sin. First off, James 3:10. It's about blessings and curses. Not the same as cussing. As for Colossians, very clearly, obscenity is not profanity. Addressing the Ephesians verse, it's very clear that it's always about the meaning of the words and not the specific words you choose to use. It's time for a short interview. I ran an experiment within my friend group. Most of them are good Bible reading Christians. I'll say like 80% at least at the time of making this. I never cuss when I text. I won't even type these phrases. So I sorted them out into 2 groups and sent these messages to each half. Now the results were very, very interesting. First off, over 50% of them's responses were negative. Ouch. Some of you were just very, very mean. Only 3 of them were able to figure out me doing this was for some YouTube video experiment. Of the almost 100 people I texted, like 10% straight up just ignored me. But more interestingly, only 8% of everyone I asked directly addressed how weird it was that I was swearing. And of these, only 1 person's response was negative. Almost everyone who questioned me had a positive response to the message itself, but then soon after asked why I was cursing though. In an appropriate setting, good fucking job meets all the requirements of Ephesians 4:29 to be acceptable. This is exactly the reason why I'm against the use of soft swear words. Hey everyone. Hey pa. What a motherfucking good day. Finally made it, you biatch never let me yande. Actually pa, it's not a good morning. Fleck you. And I hope your mother freaking dies while being flecked in the ass, you piece of shite. I just got fired. Fuck. Whoa. Where's all that language from? Actually, Pa, you have to sign these papers now because we are terminating our friendship with you. We can't be friends with someone who uses such language. If you would just sign here and here. Guys, what the fuck? Whoa. Where's all that language from? Like, you may have changed the words, but the intent is still the same. The same people who will be mad about me saying, I'm so fucking tired, are the ones who probably will not bat an eye when I casually use the Lord's name in vain. Even though as a Christian, casually saying one of these things is a very wrong thing to do. My friends' responses, despite their small sample size, prove something very apparent. That whether or not you think cursing is a religious issue or not, we can all agree to the fact that it's a cultural issue. Another biblical point that people often bring up is that what comes out of the mouth is an overflow of the heart. And I don't disprove that. It's the Bible, pretty hard for an ex-Christian to disprove. But more often than not, the heart is just fucking stressed. Remember the study from Dr. Peterson I brought up earlier, the one with this reasoning? Yeah, there's a reason why construction workers and retail clerks casually cuss a lot more often than the average person. Swear words are often used to communicate thoughts and feelings that are not harmful or hateful in any way, but they still give our brains the same benefits. We feel less stressed when we know we've warned others of the lurking predator, so therefore we feel less stressed when we curse. That's why people who use soft swear words still feel the positive effects of using them, because in changing the words, they haven't actually change the intent. And that's another likely reason why people who experience more anxiety and nervousness under certain situations are more likely to swear in those situations, even though they, like me, were prone to code switching in their speech. That's why when I thought I would get an F in my class, I swore in front of my very Christian friend, despite my brain literally having a code against doing so. I wasn't being evil, I was just fucking stressed. The main point is that in Christianity, whenever it comes to swearing, the specific words we use never mattered. How we use those words is always what mattered. As with almost everything under the sun, corrupted swearing will lead to sin. The fact that this video probably will never make any money is proof of how cultural the issue of cussing is. But it's also true that how we react and interact with our culture can often lead us into sin. But the point of this video isn't to convince all of you to just go on cussing willy-nilly, like however you want. Because remember 1 Corinthians 6:12. But despite this, we shouldn't pretend that our basis for the arbitrary rules we apply to ourselves stem from the Bible when they don't. It's okay to not want to cuss because it affects your faith. Heck, I don't like to cuss. Every time I had to swear in this video, I felt extremely uncomfortable. But that's not based on any biblical commandment. I just don't like to cuss because it reminds me of my old life. And I don't want to live that life anymore. That's why I left. But just because it feels wrong and sinful to me, doesn't mean it's wrong and sinful for everybody. And it's quite obvious that over the past few years, the church has misconstrued a whole lot of things, for which I'll admit there may be actual solid biblical evidence for Christians to not engage in. But rather than confronting these issues critically and appealing to the logic of a fellow potential Christian, you expect people to just follow along and just trust you. That's the reason why I wouldn't call myself a Christian. Because if blindly following religion is what being a Christian is, then even Christ himself wouldn't call himself a Christian. I've been in corrupt institutions my whole life, and I didn't rejoin the faith just to subscribe to another one. I reconverted because of Jesus. We are not called to govern arbitrary laws, but we're called to bring people, ourselves, our communities, whatever, closer to God, focused on Christ. There was a time just after I'd reconverted where I felt completely alone, even in crowds of people. I just wanted to disappear. But when Christ was all I had, I finally understood that Christ is all I need. If your Christian teaching and encouragements and theories are leading people away from Christ, then you've already lost the plot. And at the end of all this, I'll admit, I still have no idea what my biblical stance on this issue is. But if you've watched all the way to the end of this video and you feel you're more educated than I am, and rather than explaining your views to me in the comments, you've already typed out an angry response on how I have no idea what I'm talking about, well then I'm sorry for wasting your time. So fuck off. And fuck you. Okay, this is a more serious video. There's barely any skits or bits or jokes or anything, but I just felt like I needed to get it out. It was initially a Peaches with Power, like short segment thing, but in researching it, it took a life of its own and now we're here. I am currently and hopefully forever Christian, so I want to clarify that I'm not saying sin depends on who you are. That's not true at all, but I'd like to expand on that statement, but honestly, I'm so tired from making this video, so if you do have an actual question about it, you can type in the comments, or you're probably my friend, so just text me. My personal conviction with cussing is that I'm someone in a position where people value my advice a lot on spiritual issues, right? So despite my frustration with how religious leaders have weaponized the cultural stigma surrounding cursing, that stigma still exists, and I wouldn't want to harm the messages that I will be sharing to people, especially when those messages are about Christ. The larger point at the end of everything is that as Christians, we should be more open to discussing exactly why we think certain issues are taboo, rather than just brushing them aside, because then we will never be having conversations with anyone else, and we'll just keep arguing with ourselves. And you'd feel good for winning at the end, but in the words of someone very smart, no one sees you when you win when you're playing solitaire, because at the end of the day, you are just playing yourself. Thanks to everyone who helped me research this video. And Michael, don't forget to give Pa the hat on time or he'll be very upset.